Hey, welcome back to the Kobi Simmat audio experience. In this episode, I'm talking about, are you partying away your youth? And are we killing off, for the having fun now, are we sacrificing our future? Luke gave me some really good ideas for this particular podcast. It's timely for a number of people in this particular office that are trying to get into the property market and are finding it increasingly difficult and probably realizing that they should have started a little bit earlier. So it is interesting. I'm going to be talking a little bit about work-life balance, what my view of it is. I'm 46 years old this year, I think. That's about right. And I think I can think back to the advice that I could give myself when I was, say, 25, 26. So if you are somebody who's in that age bracket, or you've got people in that age bracket around you, and or we can check in with where you are on your life journey. In this episode, I've got some tips and tricks and my opinion on how you might be able to accelerate the position that you're in, or accelerate from the position that you're currently in. So let's get into it. Luke's here in the studio with me helping to record this particular podcast, and we've got a team of 20-somethings here at Best Practice, and it does come up quite often. So I've got some advice in this particular podcast for the 20-somethings, and so if you do know somebody who is a 20-something and they are interested in maybe making some progress, getting some forward momentum in their life, then maybe this podcast is for them. So maybe copy the link and share it with them via text or tag them in a post so they get to listen to it. One thing that I'm really excited about right now is the cryptocurrency market. And I'm not excited about it because it's crashed or grown or people have made a lot of money. I'm excited because it's brought the current generation of 20-somethings into an awareness about making money. And it's brought it to the forefront of, I guess, topical conversation, particularly on social media, things like TikTok and Snapchat, and obviously some of the other platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, etc. I'm really excited by that. When I was 20, there was no conversations, and it wasn't, unless you were, you moved in circles with people that were in the money markets or in the financial and investing markets, you just didn't have any awareness of this kind of stuff. You might have read the newspaper. If you were lucky that somebody went and invested in the newspaper each day, you might have read that and you might have got that awareness. So I'm really excited by that. I think I've got a lot of, anticipation for current 20-somethings and their ability to be more aware of their financial future and setting themselves up. And I guess that's the context of this particular podcast, which is to really be thinking about what does our future look like. So in thinking about the next 6 months in your life, or thinking about the next 12 months in your life, what does success look like? What does your financial success look like? What is the dollar value that you would like to have, honestly, and be honest with yourself? What's the dollar value that you would like to have in your bank account in 12 weeks' time? What's the savings goal? In 24 months' time, what's the dollar value that you would like to have in your bank account? Now, the next question, before you jump ahead and make comments and kind of think about that it's kind of pointless having cash in the bank, and I'll explain why it's important to not have cash in the bank in a second. I want you to think about what's the dollar value that you'd like to have in the bank account, and then if you had that dollar value in your bank account, the very next day, what are you going to go and do with that cash? What are you going to do with that money? Why is it important to have that dollar value? Is it because you want $25,000 in the bank to go on a holiday? Is it because you want $100,000 in the bank as a deposit for a house? Is it because you want to buy a car? You want to buy a fancy car. We did a TikTok video yesterday about, I'm asking, for suggestions for, I'm not necessarily looking, but we asked the question, if I was looking for a fancy car to buy right now, what should I buy? I mean, I can afford just about any car that's on the market right now myself. If I was to liquidate some of my investments, I could go and buy a car, a fancy car. Some of the cars are going up in value, but a lot of them are going down. Not necessarily a wise investment, but needless to say, people set themselves a goal to buy a fancy car. I think it's important to buy a reliable car that you enjoy driving if cars are part of your culture. If catching the bus or the train is part of your life, then, or a tram, it's obviously different, but I think it's important to have a reliable car, and it's important in my line of work. My car is 50% my office, or 50% of my office is my car. So what's really exciting about what's happening on social media right now is that people are starting to realize that there are markets, there's market cycles, that you can make investments, and yes, you can make money. I think that's great. I think the other thing that's really exciting is there's a little bit more awareness around companies significantly increasing in value, particularly tech companies. People making a lot of money in the early part of their life. Case studies on people like Mark Zuckerberg, for example, the guys that started Uber, the guys that started Airbnb, the guys that started HubSpot, some of the tech companies that people are starting to make some money. And I think it's great for the kids to be able to see that. And that was something that we couldn't see. You know, people where I grew up, in Sydney, Australia, we either read the Daily Telegraph, which I call the paper of the people, or we read the Sydney Morning Herald. That was kind of it. There's a few other papers, the Australian, the Financial Review, some of those sorts of things. But on the building sites where I was doing my labouring while I was studying at college, it was the Telegraph. And the Telegraph had no financial information. There was no financial awareness. There was no investment guidance. There was no journalists writing about that stuff. There was no social media. And so we just weren't aware of it. And so we weren't able to be aware of career paths that we could take if we wanted to make a little bit more money because we wanted other things in our life. It sucks to be poor. Granted, and money doesn't make you happy. But what money does do is money gives you freedom. Money gives you the ability to make choices. And this was kind of the first topic that Luke wanted me to talk about in this particular podcast is a lot of people are really enjoying life right now in their 20s and partying really hard and doing drugs and kind of not living, you know, they're living kind of week to week. I can't remember exactly what Luke told me to say, but I get the concept that there's a lot of 20-year-olds, and there's some in the team here at Best Practice that they live week to week. They come to work hungover on a Monday morning because they're drinking and partying on a Sunday night, on a school night, as we say, and they're not really thinking about their future. And a month turns into 6 months, turns into a year, turns into 2 years, 3 years, 5 years really quickly. Now that's great, and I think that's excellent that while you've got no overheads, you can have a lot of freedom. But then your desires start to change, and maybe you meet somebody and you have a significant partner, maybe you want to start a family, maybe you start to you're sick and tired of moving houses because you're renting and you need to keep moving around, and you want to settle down into a house, maybe buy a house or make a place your own, make a home. You want to make a home. And so your overheads need to increase, and when your overheads increase, your freedom can start to be impacted if you don't increase your earning potential. So it's something that I want you to be thinking about is if you are somebody who is listening to this, or you know a 20-something who is kind of motivated and they know they're destined for something bigger, then you can start asking some questions. And I think asking some leading questions and some influential questions is a good way to get people started. I think that giving advice and saying what you should do is save some money, what you should do is stop partying, what you should do is this, what you should do is that, that's not an influential way. That's not a way that's going to get a good impact. So I think first and foremost, setting some examples. I think that professional development and reading and learning and doing what's happening right now. You're listening to this podcast. I'm talking, you're listening. There's a bunch of people that are not listening to this podcast. There's a bunch of people that will never hear this podcast. There's a bunch of people that are just not in this space. So you're in the right space, you're in the right place, and you're seeking information and you're listening, which I think is excellent. So well done. The next question is how can you influence the people around you? And have you got yourself sorted out first? So I think there's two things here. One is sort yourself out first, because I've fallen into the trap of giving people advice, but I haven't really sorted myself out first. So now when I sort of think I'm about to open my mouth and give someone advice, I'm like, have I taken that advice? Am I an example? Stay in my lane. Stay in the lane and I'm going and getting experience, and then I can confidently talk about it. But it's something that I want you to think about. So what do we want to do? I want you to think about the next 6 months. I want you to think about the next 12 months. What's the bank balance that you want to have? What are you going to then go do with that money? And then is that money going to make its own money? So is that investment going to grow? And what's been happening, particularly now, it's the end of, not the end of COVID, but we're 18 months into the COVID pandemic, global pandemic. Financial markets are kind of up and down, but we have seen a lot of people make a lot of money during this pandemic. And that's been, because of social media, it's kind of very public. How did they do that? So they educated themselves. Nobody that I'm aware of, that I've met, that's in my circle of friends, of the people that made a lot of money, fluked it accidentally. They put themselves in the right position pre-pandemic. They put themselves into a position that was a good position to be in case something happened, in case there was a global apocalypse. And so I think it's important to educate yourself. Post-pandemic, particularly after the Spanish flu pandemic, after the First World War, after the Second World War, after the global financial crisis, there were a lot of people that made a lot of money. Now, the objective is not necessarily to make a lot of money. Remember, the objective is that money gives you freedom. Money gives you the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want, and more of whatever you want, whenever you want. So you can make a choice. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want right now. And the longer that you do that for in your 20s, the less you can do later in your life. It's counterintuitive. So you can do a lot more. If you work hard right now and you educate yourself, when I say work hard, I mean educate hard, learn hard and educate yourself and bring knowledge to areas of investments and financial advice, you will have a heap more freedom later in life. If you party hard right now, and that's fine, I'm not saying you don't have to, I'm just saying that you may feel like you've got freedom right now, but later in life, it's going to be less and less, and you're going to be more and more restricted because over time things become more expensive, life becomes more expensive, there's more options, there's more things to do, and you won't have that freedom later on. It's what I call the lottery mentality. I didn't, but people did. They party really hard in their early 20s, they burnt all their money, they didn't plan for the future. And so what they do now is they invest in lottery tickets. It's it's what I call a lottery mentality. I buy scratchies or I buy lottery tickets every week in the hope that I can gamble and I will make money. And so we know that's not a wise decision. We know the odds are stacked against you. So to stack the odds in your favor, it's starting to think now, right now in your life. Forget how old you are, right now in your life. What am I doing to educate myself around investing and finance and my multiple sources of income? So the key word here, and I know I'm rambling a bit and I apologize for that, it's important here to be thinking about multiple sources of income, not just going to your job and having a single source of income. Starting to think about what your multiple sources of income are. Take some of the money, try to create a surplus each week, 10% of what you earn each week, and put that cash to work. Educate yourself and put that in a place where it can work for itself. So the first thing to do is to ensure that you're doing professional development every single week. $30, buy a book, read the book, one book a week. If you can't do a book a week, do a book a month. It's $30 a month. If you invest that $30 in a book and read the book, it will pay dividends. Business books, investment books, financial books, the more you read, the more aware you will be, and then you will see opportunities. And so if we think about the COVID-19 pandemic and the people that made money through that pandemic, they put themselves in the right place at the right time, and they made money because they educated themselves. There's none of the people that I know that made money in the pandemic fluked it. They were all positioning themselves strategically for opportunities. And in fact, they were going to make the money anyway. It's just that there's a bunch of people that weren't well positioned that lost money and went backwards. So I would like you to be thinking about, and the first investment. So the first percentage of money that you can take out of your fixed income is to invest in yourself. Invest it in yourself, in personal development and education. Then start to think about an area that you might be interested in. There is different asset classes, and as you start to think about your 20s, real estate, and I appreciate that particularly here in Australia, real estate is growing in value, and a lot of people are attributing that to the pandemic. What I can attribute that to is I've been watching real estate really closely for the last 30 years. My family are real estate investors. My father's an architect. My family does developments. We do renovations, we do developments. That's what I've grown up with. And so I've been watching the market for a very long time, and I have seen, I think probably in my lifetime, I've seen probably 4 to 5 market cycles. Pre-COVID, real estate in Australia was suppressed. It had a period of about 36 months, 48 months of limited to low growth. on the median house price Australia-wide. And what's happened is it was setting itself up for a spike. It was setting itself up. And then what has happened is the pandemic has been a catalyst to people realizing that they can work from home, realizing that they don't need to commute. And for a vast majority of people, they can live in regional communities that are much prettier, cleaner, slower paced lifestyle, and they can have an enjoyable experience in a holiday town. They can literally move and live in a holiday town on the coast, in the bush, in the forest. They can go do that and still continue to earn an income. Their lifestyle expenses decreased because the properties were a little bit cheaper in comparison to where they live. And so they took an expectation of a high property price, like for example, where I live, in the coastal area and the beachfront area that I live in. People are moving from where I live to other areas that are a little bit cheaper, but they have a high property price expectation. So they go somewhere else where the properties are a bit cheaper, and they're happy to pay a little bit more than the market price because they're used to property prices being double or triple what they're spending money on. So the property price goes up. So there were people setting themselves up, accumulating property in those cheap areas because they went, you know what, this area is going to go up. It's going to go up. I've been watching the property market for 30, 40, 50 years. This area it's destined to go up. It's beautiful. It's got a lot going for it. And so it's going to go up. So when we think about asset classes, there's property, there's stocks and investments in different companies. And it's important to think about the fundamentals of those companies. Is this something that people are going to need in the future? Is it something that they want? Is it desirable? Will people buy it? If that's the case, then the value of that company will go up. Is this something people need? Is it something people want? Is it attractive? Is it interesting? Is it trending? Those are the companies to invest in. There are companies that are essential services. Those would be the companies to make long-term investments in. Utilities, infrastructure. But be mindful, things like electricity companies right now, they're not necessarily going to be trending because particularly here in Australia, electricity is becoming decentralized. There are people like myself that are starting to think about taking their house off the grid. So I wouldn't invest in an energy utility, for example. I wouldn't invest in a power company. What is happening is people are putting solar panels on their houses and then buying electric cars. I wouldn't be investing in a crude oil company right now. I wouldn't be investing in a petrol company right now because I saw this morning 3 electric cars driving to work. I saw those cars drive out of houses that had solar panels on the roof. 3 of them, they're in my street. I'll be doing something very similar in the next 24 months. There will be an electric car in our garage. There will be solar panels on our roof. There will be batteries on our wall, and we will be cutting the cable to the street. I will not be paying an electricity bill to a power company in 24 months' time. That's my plan, and I'm working towards it. I will still have a vehicle that runs on gas, diesel. I have to for work and for the type of work, the remote travel that we do, and some of the businesses that we run. But for the running around town, we will be moving to an electric vehicle. So the utility company's business case starts to become redundant, and companies do become redundant over time. And so we want to be trying to do a forecast. So Jeff Bezos's investment advice for company and stocks is it going to be in business in 10 years' time? So what should we do to wrap this up? Let's start thinking of do we take advantage of no responsibility right now? Or do we start thinking about, are we basically killing off our life later on? So we want to start to think about that. If you're somebody who wants to invest, if you're somebody who wants to make money, if you're somebody who wants to have more freedom later in life, you don't have to be a 20-something. I want you to start to think about the investments that you can be making in yourself. So what I want you to think about right now is I want you to think about what your goals are. I want you to write a bucket list. Right now, I'm writing myself a bucket list of 101 things to do before I die. It's literally my bucket list. I did a Google search. I looked for some inspiration. What are some of the other bucket list goals people set for themselves? Have I done some of those things? I've done a lot. And I've done a lot of the things on most people's public bucket lists. So I'm starting to say, okay, I've got some inspiration on some categories, some things I want to learn, some things I want to do. And I'm also looking for some inspiration. It keeps me motivated. One of the most addictive emotions is anticipation. If you can set yourself small goals in lots of different parts of your life, and if you can start to think about what it's going to feel like to achieve that goal, it's going to give you anticipation. It's going to give you something to focus on. It's going to give you something to work on. It's also going to help you say no to the invitation to go out drinking and clubbing on Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. Because as much fun as that is in the moment, you are sacrificing your future, and that's okay. I'm not saying you have to stop that. But what I am saying is if you are somebody who wants to have freedom for more life, for more of your life, for a longer period of time, then now's the time to maybe just scale it back just a little bit and start investing in yourself and writing yourself a bucket list of goals, maybe 101 things that you want to do, and start focusing on that list and making plans each day to start ticking things off that bucket list for life. And money is going to give you that. Money is going to give you that freedom. And what's going to happen is you've got purpose. You've got the purpose. My purpose is I want to have these experiences. I want to feel these feelings. I want to feel these emotions, and I want to do these things in my life. That's going to be my resume for life. So I hope this has been motivational for you. I hope I've given you some interest areas to go look into. A quick wrap up on asset classes. There's property, real estate, there's stocks, there's currencies, there's hobbies, there's little unique antique things that you can invest in. There's lots of different things you can invest in. Some good friends of mine have invested in sports cards or non-fungible tokens. There's lots of things that you can invest in that do go up in value due to supply and demand. So I want you to think about that. The best thing you can be doing right now after this podcast, you're already investing in yourself, is continue to invest in yourself and start making yourself aware of opportunity. And then the more aware you are, the more confident you'll be to move, and you'll know you're in the right place at the right time to making those investments. If you have a success, if something happens that goes really well, I'd love to hear about it. It's something that makes me really proud, is to hear that people I've been able to help you on your journey to success in your life. So hopefully I'm creating some business freedom for you. Hopefully I'm motivating and inspiring you to get out there and get stuck into that bucket list of life. And hopefully you can start setting yourself up for the massive life that you know you're destined to have. I wish you well.